Hey, Deuce.
Hey, Rube.
Let's go back in time a little. 2003, Donovan's start was really similar to Carson's start this year. And then you guys went off and won 9 straight games, went to the NFC Championship game. What do you remember about the way Donovan kind of worked out of that? It was the worst start of his career. He was in his 5th year, like Carson. And what lessons maybe can you guys take from that and maybe apply to Carson?
Yeah, you went way back in time, Rube. That's really old school there. Brought me back to some of my memories. But just some of the things that we teach every day, some of the things that Doug stressed, myself, I stress it, and really taking it one day at a time. Taking it one day at a time, making sure as a team, not just talking about Carson, as a team, we got to go back and make our corrections, making sure we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's, and make sure we're doing the little things right.
John and then Mike K.
Hey, Deuce.
Hey.
Just wanted to ask you a little bit about Miles Sanders and his playing time. The first 2 games he's been back, it's about 75, 80%. Do you think that's sustainable, or do you want more production out of your number 2 and 3 guys?
I think that's sustainable. There's a reason why he's won. He has to go out there, and we depend on him. He's our guy. He has to go out there, and he has to play. And sometimes it's going to be like that. If you got a playmaker like Miles, you want him on the field all the time. But also, Corey and Boston, those guys know they can be plugged in at any moment. So going out there, playing 80%, like you said, 90% or whatever, that's what we expect. And I expect it out of him also. And I believe he expects that.
Mike and then Bo.
Hey, Deuce, I was just curious, how involved are you in the play calls for Jalen Hurts? I know he's been involved in the run game, but just overall, how much input do you have there, and how much creativity do you add to those play calls, and what do you like about his game?
We're all involved. Once again, we all have our hand on the game plan. So anytime you have a dynamic player like him and we can squeeze him in for a couple plays, we all get creative and we all try to go cook up something nice. Of course, you have to go back to his film and try to see what he did well and try to incorporate it with your team.
Bo and then Les.
One thing we've been talking to Doug about this week, Deuce, is sort of the the screen game not being where it had been last year, and some of the struggles there. What do you see there? What do you guys need to fix? Is it are you giving things away? What's missing from the screen game?
No, it starts with us, coaches. That's where I'm gonna start first. And as a group, coaches, we got to do better. I'm starting with myself. And I got to do better, make sure I'm scouting better, making sure I go back and look at the last 3 weeks, looking at those teams, see if I can pick up on any calls, any little thing different, any little things that's different that they're doing. I got to go study and make sure that we take care of that. And then we got to go out there and do the little things once again. That's what it's about. Making sure you detail your work. And as running backs, we got to detail our work in order for us to be better in the screen game. Around here for a long period of time, the screen game was in the top 10, top 5 for a long period of time. So we got to get back to that.
Les and then Ed.
That was pretty much exactly what I was going to ask, Deuce. But I do want to kind of clarify.
You got another question.
Well, actually, I just wanted to expand on that. You talked about going back and looking at, you're talking about other teams, what they're doing against you, or you're talking about you guys' tendencies for other teams to sniff out on screens?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And I'll start with ourselves. And we got to make sure we're not giving it away, from eyes to depth, alignment, certain things like that. So you check there first. And then when you go back and study the last 3 weeks, because we haven't had any success, you go back and see what the defense is doing. And then you try to counter.
Okay.
And then Jeff.
Hey, Deuce, just want to ask you about Boston and Corey. You mentioned them. They haven't played a lot of snaps. When they've played, they don't seem to be that effective. I mean, how difficult is it to keep them sharp and to get them to flash when they get into a game?
Yeah, you got to remember, this is their job, and they know that. So keeping them sharp, keeping them focuses on the details and the little things is their job and what they have to do. So when they do get an opportunity, they do get a chance to go in there and make a play. They have to. So I love where they are because they're hungry, they're excited, they want to be out there making plays. So while Miles is out there doing what he do and he comes off, no matter if he comes off for 2 or 3 plays in a row or no matter if he comes off for 1, the guy that's going in the game has a job to do, and that's his job.
Jeff and then Dave.
Duce, why did you guys have Devonta Freeman in a few weeks ago, and what came of that visit?
You said, why did we have him in?
Yes.
We didn't.
Oh, you didn't have him in. Okay, there was a report that you planned on having him in. Then why didn't you end up having him in then?
I want to say he signed with the Giants, maybe. Didn't he sign with them?
He did, but there was a report before then that you guys were going to bring him in. So I'm just wondering what happened.
Yeah, we never got to that. We never. And just to that point, just remember, we always looking for talent. And we always looking for anybody out there that can help, no matter what the position in. You can bring him in for a workout and see if he can help your team. That's what this is about.
Dave and then Tim.
Hey, Duce, you've mentioned a couple times, even before the season, that you think Miles can handle this big workload. How do you know that, especially about a young player when they've never done it before in the NFL?
Yeah, you don't know it. You got to put him out there. Of course, looking back to last year, you see some of the numbers, as far as how long he was in the game, how many plays, and you take that and you try to add on to it. And that's what we're doing here now. And that's what it's about, being in the NFL and being a feature back. If you're going to be the feature back in the NFL, you got to go out there and you're going to play a lot of plays. You got to be, of course, we all know you got to be in condition and you got to make sure you know what you're doing. But if you want to be called the feature back, you got to go out there and you got to play most of the game.
We have time for a couple more, so we'll go Tim, EJ, and Zach.
Hey, Duce, I just wanted to ask you more generally about the screen, the art of the screen game. Like, what are the 2 or 3, top keys to a successful screen game, in your opinion?
Yeah, so you got to go back, and when you're breaking down the defense, and I'm not going to get into all that, but there's certain things as coaches we look for, and it starts with the rush, of course, and then you also got to see what they're doing with their linebackers. If you go back and watch the game for the last 2 weeks, you were seeing their defensive end kind of widen and try to hit Miles in the backfield before he got started. So that tells you right there, coming into that game, they had a plan to try to take Miles away from route running. Well, if they're doing that already, they're keying on him. So certain things you got to look for, and you got to continue to look for, that try to help you understand how they're playing the back and how they would play the screen.
EJ and then Zach.
Hey, Duce, I'm just curious, how is Miles conditioning right now, and how have the injuries that he's had in training camp and, with the glute this week, how have they impacted that?
When you look back, of course, we all know he didn't have a camp, but that's an excuse, and I told him that. In our room, we don't have excuses. We grab the bull by the horns and we ride. We understand coming out of camp, you didn't get a lot of plays. Okay, great. So now you got to pick it up and get back to where you were last year. And that's what we want out of him. And as a group, not just him, everybody in that room. And we also condition as a group. So, you got to look at it this way also for you guys. Not having a camp and being able to come out the second game versus Ram and play as long as he did, and then come out versus Cincinnati and play over 90 plays. Of course, he's going to be a little fatigued. He's going to be a little tired, but that's a part of it.
Last question here with Zach.
Hey, Duce, I'm curious about the way you're talking about Miles. This is our 3rd time speaking with you this season, and you haven't been afraid to put a lot on Miles' shoulders. And it seems these past few years, you haven't really done that with a running back. Is it because you've noticed something special about Miles? Is it because his role on the team? How would you characterize that?
I think that he can handle it. I'll start there. I wouldn't put a lot on someone's plate if I didn't think they could handle it. So maybe if you go back and, some of the past interviews I had, and you're right, I never really talked in depth about a guy or what I'm doing as far as putting this on his shoulders or that on his shoulders. But I think that Miles can handle it. I think Boston can handle it. I think Corey can handle it. But right now, talking about Miles and being in that role, the starter role and playing a lot of plays, you got to be able to do a lot of things. You got to be able to go and be effective in the pass game. You got to be, of course, be effective in the run game. You got to be able to pick up blitzes. So it's a lot of things that's on this plate. Not just him, whoever's out there. But, of course, we're talking about Miles because the last couple of games he's been out there the most.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, guys.
Just really good day from your defensive line last week against Cincinnati, 8 sacks. What was the key there? Why were you able to put up such a high total?
Oh, I think we obviously had opportunities. The guys were playing hard. I think that's always our message to the guys about creating opportunities and, whether it's stopping the run to get us in a position where, their team's passing or always getting off the ball continuously because, sometimes you don't know. It's obviously everyone sees the third down stuff, when it's a rush moment and it's third down and we know we're getting off the ball. But, we had some early down sacks too. So I think just for us, it's always been about just, not wasting any rush opportunities. Like the obvious ones are obvious. And I thought we did a decent job of putting ourselves in position that when the opportunities came, we were hitting it hard and we were getting off the ball and then obviously finishing at the quarterback. So it was some encouraging signs for sure.
John and then Jeff.
Hey, Matt, if you go all the way back to week 1, Josh Sweat got some extra reps because of injuries to Vinny and Brandon got a little bit banged up. What have you seen from him? He looks like he's producing, and do you think he's earned a larger role as you move forward, even as the guys get healthier?
Yeah, so for the first part, just with Josh, I think the thing that we've really been stressing with him and where he's been sort of showing us that, just being consistent. I think he has talent. I think he always has. He's an explosive player and, really just been stressing sort of, being able to repeat the sort of the motions, the get off, the take off, the explosion, just being consistent with that repetitive, always having the same thing and not fidgeting with his feet and some of those things that sometimes I think slow him down. So I feel like he's really taken to that and obviously some of the results are showing. And really just in general, with that whole group, again, we feel pretty strong about, the mix of guys we have and part of our big picture philosophy, even for the tackles, is just keeping those guys fresh, you know what I mean? So in terms of a bigger role, we really try to roll groups and, the way that Jim wants us to play as a front, requires us, playing at a high level of energy and exertion. So we really try to limit the, guys playing 80 snaps in a game because I don't think that they can play the way we ask them to play. So he's obviously in the mix. He's been playing well and obviously producing for us and had another sack last week and those sort of things. But again, if you look at our overtime period when we had a lot of production with hits and sacks, part of that was because we were rolling those guys. So I'm not sure, the philosophy from that point is going to change any. I think everybody's going to keep getting opportunities and we're going to keep trying to roll guys fresh so we can keep throwing our fastballs.
Jeff and then Mike.
Matt, in the Rams game, we saw the ends struggle with the naked boots and containment and staying disciplined. And it seems like the 49ers do some of that. What has been the message to those guys to focus and do their jobs?
Yeah, well, I know Jim doesn't address schemes, so I'll let him address the scheme stuff. I think, again, for us, we just try to stress hitting our spots. You know what I mean? And it's not always that we're not always contained players. We're not always this players or quarterback players on some of those plays. So, for us, it's trying to hit our lines and hit our marks and do it full speed. So I do think, obviously, this is a similar offensive scheme with the stretch run game. And some boots off it. There's a few different wrinkles that the Rams had and a few different wrinkles that the Niners have. So I think the biggest thing for our guys is just narrowing that focus. Again, part of the I don't know if you want to call it the beauty of these offenses is they put a lot in your face, right? There's distractions, there's motions, there's shifts, it's run, then boot off the same action. So I think for all of our guys, but particularly our ends, their job is just to narrow their focus so they're not seeing a lot of the distractions and just hitting their spots and executing what we're asking them to do. So I think that'll be a big key for us this week as well.
Mike and then Bo.
Matt, what did you see from Derek Barnett and Javon Hargrave as they've kind of come back since, missing basically most of the summer of padded practice?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, missed both those guys missed a lot of time early, and Javon particularly, just obviously coming from a new system and being a scheme. So, I've actually been really impressed with. I'll start with Hargrave. Just he's gotten up to speed pretty quick on that. From a technique standpoint, obviously we're asking him to do a few different things and play a little differently than he has in the past. I thought he made a huge leap from his first game to last game, and he's had a really good week of practice. So I hope that trend's continuing with him. You saw last week, I think, particularly with him, he's just got a knack for sort of slipping off some blocks. And, again, some of the stuff we just talked about in the last question with the play actions and the boots and things, he's got kind of knack for cracking some of those protections. So I'm hoping that trend continues. He's done, again, for a guy that is basically playing in a new scheme and new technique and only having a few weeks of practice, he's done a really good job. Derek had a little bit longer history with the scheme. Obviously, he had some production last week. And again, I think it's just the same thing, just kind of, I don't want to say knocking the rust off, but just growing back into, again, just the continual hitting the footwork, hitting your spots, hitting your aiming points and those sort of things. And I would say both those guys from their first game to last week had showed market improvement. So we're trying to keep them on that trend for sure.
Bo and then Martin.
Hey, Matt, I wanted to ask you about Gennard. He's unusually smaller, I guess, short for a defensive end. We know he's got pass rush upside, but do you find that when he's in the game, opposing teams are sort of aware that he's there and maybe try to run sort of in his direction?
I haven't seen that. I wouldn't say that. I think, again, Gennard's different. He's a different body type for us. And one of the things with that stuff is, he's fast. He's explosive. You saw that screenplay that there was a penalty on, but he tracked down, when he was kind of dropping in some coverage stuff for us. So, I think the danger with that, is obviously he has a chance to track down some of those plays or make some loose plays. So, and again, it's the same thing with him. We're just asking him to hit his aiming points and be consistent in what we're asking him to do. And again, he does it a slightly different way because of his athleticism and body type, but I haven't seen him be deficient in those spots.
Time for a few more, so we'll go Martin, Zach, and Rube.
Hey, Matt. I know you've only had a game or two with Javon and Malik, at defensive tackle next to Fletch and everything, but have you kind of been able to notice like how teams have adjusted and how they're playing Fletch now compared to maybe last year, as far as the double teams are concerned?
There was not necessarily. I think, again, part of bringing those guys in and building that group that way was, trying to be able to take some of the focus off Fletch, obviously, in some of the past game. There was, last week they did a couple things, kind of in the second half at that 2-minute drive at the end of the half that were a little different from protection than we had saw. So, I don't know if that was Fletch related or not. But I think the more that those guys play, Malik's been super productive for us and been really good rushing and being active. So, and then with Javon growing into things, I think the more that we put that on tape and those guys see that, it's going to be the hope would be that it's going to be harder to just isolate Fletch and try to take him out of a game because there's going to be other weapons that we can utilize. So I'm not sure there's a big enough sample size yet to really get into sort of what we're seeing, but obviously that the more success those guys have, the less pressure it takes off of him. So that'd be the goal.
Go ahead, Zach.
Hey, Matt, you've spoken about the rotation you have, and frankly, it's both end and tackle on a game-to-game basis. Is that distribution determined ahead of time? Is it the flow of the game? How do you determine how many snaps which player plays? We go. It's like anything else, right? You go in with a plan. So obviously, I don't want to go in blind. So I usually go in, and I'll be honest with you, it's probably one of my most challenging parts of the week is really managing that game day stuff and making sure, again, what we're getting fresh. We're getting everyone the work that we want to work, and sometimes it's matchup specific. We want guys in certain situations versus others. We obviously have a lot of different packages. I mean, I didn't think it would be, but it's probably one of the more challenging things I have to deal with. So usually go into a plan, of like, hey, this is kind of about the ratio of snaps we're looking for, or
hey, these scenarios we want kind of this group, and this scenario we want this group. But I would say it obviously becomes fluid, and usually the second half becomes a little bit more of in the flow. You kind of go in and get a feel, maybe a guy's playing better, or there's a matchup, a guy's winning his rushes against a certain guy better, so you kind of want to go back to that a little bit more, or some guy's feeling fresher. Everything like that kind of goes into it. So there's definitely a plan, and again, we try to keep those guys fresh. We do want to start the rotation, especially earlier in the game, and kind of keep guys in and out a little bit. And then I would say as the game goes on and you start getting a feel of who's playing better, or just like I said, whatever that scenario is, sometimes it sort of skews as you start feeling like, okay, let's ride the hot hand a little bit.
Last question here with Rube.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Brandon Graham and just what you see from him as far as he's in year 11 now, obviously playing at a high level. Just the energy he brings both in the meeting room, on the sideline, on the field, in the huddle, in the building. How rare is it to have a guy who's always kind of going and giving so much both on the field and off the field?
I feel like he hit everything there. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, he's a joy to be around, man. Just from obviously he's got an infectious personality. I think with BG, like he really, I feel like sometimes guys they're afraid to put themselves out there, right? Because if that's who you are, if you're the energy guy, or that's how you are, you're on spot all the time. You know what I mean? I think BG goes the other way with it and embraces that. He wants to be he'll say to himself, all right, man, I got to be the one. He comes up to me every Sunday, hey, I'm not going to let you down energy wise. Don't let me down. And tries to get people going that way, So, it's not an easy burden to bear. People think that's just easy. And it is his personality. Obviously he's an energetic guy. And, but that, that can weigh on people a little bit, having to be the guy that's always juicing people up and always playing at a high level and running to the ball. And I think he actually takes the other way and really embraces that challenge and sees it as part of his job on the team. So, and the fact that he's doing it at whatever age he is, I don't know, I won't bring that up, but it's great. It's amazing. I mean, I'm so appreciative of it, being in the room and having a guy like that can, as a coach, you're always trying to motivate guys and be that guy and yelling and going and high-fiving and everything. And to have another guy that's always doing it takes a huge burden off me. And I think the rest of the guys feed off it for sure. So, I mean, he was, that overtime game last week was going back and forth, and, we were out there for a series, then we had to go back out. And it was, I mean, literally every time on the sideline, BG was just like, hey, man, let's go. We're going to win this. We're going to win this. He played more snaps in the group than anybody, tackles, ends, everybody. And I mean, he, at the end of the game, he gets a sack in overtime, gets a hit, and he's still going. And but I think he embraces the role of being the sort of emotional leader of our group for sure. And I think the whole defense and really sort of takes that challenge head on. And I could go on and on. I can't speak highly enough about him. It's been really cool. And obviously he's still having production. It's not like he's just a cheerleader. He's been really effective. He's been playing hard and physical, and it's been cool to be a part of.